By the way, I have to say that somebody from DOGE was very badly hurt last night. You saw that. A young man who was beat up by a bunch of thugs in D.C. And either they're going to straighten their act out in the terms of government and in terms of protection, or we're going to have to federalize and run it the way it's supposed to be run.
President Trump threatening to federalize our nation's capital again, this time after an alleged attack on a prominent former DOGE employee.
Two 15-year-olds have been arrested for attempted carjacking, the victim being Edward Corsentine, who was employed by DOGE to slash federal bureaucracy but is now at the Social Security Administration.
President Trump posted on Truth Social after the incident, saying in part that crime is totally out of control in D.C., that local youths and gang members are attacking at random because they are not afraid of law enforcement, that these youths, sometimes aging between 14 to 16, should be tried as adults. His post goes on to say if nothing changes, he will federalize Washington, D.C.
Now, this comes as crime is actually down for our nation's capital. Look at these numbers here. Overall violent crime is down 25% from the same period last year. Also, crime in D.C. was down 35% in 2024 under Biden. So technically, that's not great for President Trump, who, you know, you're the person in charge. He blames Biden for everything. It's kind of like, why did it get worse? And also, I think year to year, even looking like 2 years ago or from his first term, crime is down in D.C. So even though an issue becomes hyper-focused on, we don't want anybody to ever get carjacked or hurt. These are crime issues across the country, right? These are happening anywhere in the country. Carjackings happen probably every day, I'm assuming. So it's kind of like, it's not a, I don't think a stance where the federal government needs to come in and kind of like redo D.C. because it's such, and mind you, I've only been here for a short time. You actually live it and experience it. But from my purview, understanding and reading the stories, it's not like this rampant thing that's out of line with other states across the country.
Yeah, so I've been living in D.C. since 2012. I went to college here, and I've seen how the city has changed firsthand. And a huge part of the crime spike, of course, was due to the pandemic, but also there were a lot of policy changes made by the D.C. City Council, including a bill that was introduced by City Councilman Charles Allen that actually did give lighter sentences and penalties to youth offenders, and even for the most violent youth offenders. Things like people who had been involved in rapes and murders were able to get out of prison within 10 to 15 years if they had committed that crime under the age of 25. This has given a license to young roving gangs to go around DC and terrorize people. And although crime is down, as you mentioned, 35% last year, 25% this year, that's good news. It's really not at the level that it was when I first moved here, and certainly back in the 90s when the federal government did take control of Washington, D.C. and install a mayor who took care of crime, cleaned up the city, and really had the best run of any mayor that we've had in D.C. for the past 30 years. We've also seen that the youth crime rates in D.C. have not been tracking that general trend, and people are sick and tired of driving around the city and feeling like they could be the next victim of these carjackings, which really are more prevalent here than they are in a lot of other cities. Yeah, for sure. And I want to emphasize before I get into anything else that obviously crime is terrible, and also people who commit egregious crimes, specifically like rape and some of the things that you named, should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I think when you talk about teens and like 14 to 16, there are always opportunities to overcharge people or mischarge people. And there are also implications that certain people that look a certain way may be the ones committing the crime, like we saw in the very publicized Central Park 5 instance, where these people are now acquitted of everything. And I think that that is a time where we have to make sure that we can look at situations and say these young teens' lives were ruined over something that they were not guilty for. And we have to make sure that we're not overcharging young children in instances where they perhaps didn't do anything, or perhaps they were around, or perhaps they were young, and perhaps they need an opportunity to grow. Because the difference between people with resources and without is that people with resources can do the same crimes, but their parents can help them get out of that situation. People without resources commit a crime and they never get out of the situation. So all I want is an equal justice system for people that look all different kinds of ways and have different economic opportunities, and just be a legitimate way forward instead of just throw everybody in jail, because we know that technically does not work through many states that have tried similar programs. Yeah, I wish we had more time to get into the Central Park 5 case, because They weren't acquitted. Their sentences were vacated, which they claimed was due to this basically the sixth person, their DNA being finally matched to the person who had actually raped the woman. But all of these people did confess, including with guardians present, and had remarkably consistent accounts of what happened, even independently taking the police to the scene of the crime, separate from one another. But obviously we can't really litigate that in this short of a segment. But one of the other things I wanted to mention about this incident involving the former DOGE staffer is that he should be heralded as a hero. According to the police report, which came out last night, the Daily Caller News Foundation got their hands on it. There were actually 10 people. They obviously arrested 2, but there were 10 to 12 people who were trying to carjack a young woman. And this guy saw what was happening, and despite being severely outnumbered and outmatched, decided to step in, make sure that she was able to get in her vehicle and be protected, put his body on the line, and took the beating for her. That is an American hero. And everyone who was saying nasty things about him because he has a silly nickname ought to apologize, because this guy is who we should be looking up to. That is inspirational, what he did for that woman.
100%. I think that that's one of those things that should be not partisan at all. Somebody tried to jump in to help another person, and carjacking is wrong, right? These are two, these are just
Objective
facts.
truths.
Yeah, objective truths.
Yes.
Thank you. And I know we could talk about this forever, but with my main point was acquitted. I used the wrong word, exonerated Central Park 5, but I also understand.
I wouldn't say that either.
But they were exonerated, and I think that the point is that when you talk about young kids that were in the process the way they were and being held in rooms to speak for hours with parents that were working multiple jobs and underprivileged circumstances. These are all instances where you don't have those same resources, where your mom, if I have a daughter, I called off work, I would be wherever she was if she was getting in trouble. So there would be no questioning. There would be no lawyer not present to protect my child. All these different things would happen because I have the resources. And so we're talking about kids from the middle of the city that didn't have the resources, that had parents that were working. And so I would never want these instances to happen, to bring it back to President Trump and what he said, where we are targeting a certain group and then they're affected by this federalization of DC in one particular way, because that historically has happened, where one group is directly more affected than other groups. And sometimes people can get it wrong, is all I'm saying. And at 14 years old, when you get it wrong, this changes your life forever. You have no opportunities. Or like you see some of the people from the Central Park 5 incident are just starting to get their lives back.
Yes, I mean, the justice system does get it wrong sometimes. That is true. I think in the case of DC, where you have people who are involved in carjackings, theft, smash and grabs, and it's pretty obvious who the suspects are, then we should be really holding those people accountable. And the DC justice system has decided not to prosecute a lot of cases. Under the previous DC attorney, who was appointed by the president, he was not prosecuting 67% of cases. We've now seen a reversal of that under the Trump administration, which is good news, but I think more needs to be done to make sure that this city is safe, because what we've seen over the past 5 years has been, frankly, a disgrace.
And I think that, President Trump can do, instead of doing these press conferences about what he wants to do, maybe he should talk more to local officials that are on a different side of the aisle than him, and have dialogue more often than criticism. We see both sides do it, right? We see the mayor talk to Trump a certain way, Trump talk back, and this is all on TV for show, or on social media to say we disagree and this person's holding funding. And, we see that happening, but more conversation would probably be beneficial in this instance, right? Because he, like he says, I think in the same press conference when he was referring to Texas, is I have the checkbook. He said something about that yesterday. I write, at the end of the day, the money comes from the federal government. He makes these decisions on which locations around the country receive which funding. And so this is just a conversation. I'm sure that local officials in DC would love to be supported more to figure out how to boost up and stop more crime. Every local official should want to do that. So a conversation is needed as opposed to a threat.
I mean, yes, conversations are good, but the local officials have failed. I mean, they haven't been doing their jobs. They've been repeatedly trying to pass these so-called criminal justice reform bills that lessen penalties for some of the worst offenders, that allow, teens like this, the 14 to 16-year-olds that are doing the carjackings, they get picked up, they get put back out on the street. They did a press conference, or a listening meeting, I guess, rather, with constituents around DC, I think it was 2 years ago now, and they had some city council members there and some members of the local community. And there was a parent there who was a foster parent, and he was fostering a child who had gone out and been involved in one of these carjackings. And he was very clear, my son, my foster son, was immediately let go and brought back to my house. And now, what am I supposed to do? Ground him after he just violently carjacked somebody? We need the justice system to do a better job of making sure that they are facing real consequences so that they understand what they're doing is wrong.
Yeah, definitely. There's always room for growth, but just as long as we're not over-prosecuting kids is important.
All right, up next, plans for lunar nuclear power revealed. We'll tell you more. Don't go anywhere.